Alright, so here we are on the grounds of Port Royal Historic Site, and which is just across the way from Annapolis Royal. Now, this little spot here is a little special because first ancestor landed here around the 40s. This place was settled in 1604, I believe. Now, this is not exactly the site, only because after the first winter, well, actually, when they first settled, they settled actually in St. Croix Island over in New Brunswick and Maine, and after a terrible winter they had to move across the Bay of Fundy to settle here. So, and what happened was, after a couple of years of settling up, the settlers were ended up living with the local Mi'kmaq. So the settlement kind of went to hell basically, and it wasn't until the French returned about 20 years later, and then once things got transferred over to the English because of all the wars and all that stuff, they settled further down the harbor to what is now known as Annapolis Royal. Alright, we're entering the grounds of the Melanson settlement, which is another historic site. Now, this is more of an archaeological site. So why this site is rather important is that the early settlement life in the 1600s had a very unique way of agriculture. So after they deported all the Acadians in 1755, a few years later, New Englanders started to come up and settle here. Called them the planters. And unlike the French, the early French settlers, they had their own different way of setting up their settlements and built their houses, in a different spot where the French would be. So, and therefore, a lot of the early foundations remain untouched for a very, very long time. Alright, so the last historic site that we have here in Annapolis Royal is Fort Anne right behind me there. So we won't go in today there because my little buddy is kind of hot from the summer sun. But after the English came down in, I guess, 1730s, to really start to fortify this and protect it. It really was the first capital of Nova Scotia before it got moved over to Halifax.
Throw another thing in there. I just was reading